Erev Tov. One of the basic minhagim of the Ashkenazim for Pesach is that of kitniyot. And it's a subject that has been discussed in halacha for 900 years. The Torah only assered chametz from 5 types of grain. Anything other than that is not considered chametz min Torah. The Rabbanan added different levels of chametz, but they did not add that this chametz comes from different grains or different plants. They just said chametz that changed its form, chametz nuksha, chametz root. That's what they talked about. Now, beginning in the 12th century, with the Crusades, the Jews began to move out of France, which was a particularly strong Catholic country, and they moved eastward to Germany and to Austria. And these were the Jews that composed the nucleus of the Ashkenazi community. The Sephardim were in Spain and in the Mediterranean. The Ashkenazim were descendants of the house of Rashi. It's estimated that 80% of all Ashkenazim have some connection to the house of Rashi. So Rashi and the Balei Tesvos and the Rosh, they were the poskim for the Ashkenazim. I mean, Gershon Bar Agola was the Rebbe of Rashi's Rebbe's. They were the ones that set the halacha for this community. The Sephardim followed the Rambam, the Rif and the Rambam pretty much up the tree. And we find that in many communities from the 12th to the 16th century, for 400 years, there were many communities amongst the Sephardim that said, we only paskin like the Rambam. We don't want to hear any other opinions. You know, we don't take into account anything else but the Rambam. So you had 2 streams of halacha. Now, 95% of the time, the 2 streams agreed. But the Jews, like always, the 5% they don't agree on. And so the Ashkenazim had their own. So sometimes the Ashkenazim were more makil than the Sephardim. For instance, in matters of shchita and in matters of treifas, the Ashkenazim are far more makil than the Rambam. That's true even today. The Bet Yosef meat has, I wouldn't say a higher standard, but a different standard, because they follow the Chumash of the Rambam. The Ashkenazim, for various reasons, the Rosh and others, had great kulas in treifas. And you have that today, for instance, when people speak about glat. Glat means that you killed a behemoth, an animal, and there was nothing wrong with it. So in our world of industrialized slaughterhouses, it happens only maybe 30% of the time. So that would make it impossible to have kosher meat. Because if 70% of everything that was killed had to go treif, the price of meat would be 7 times more than it is now. So the Ashkenazim had kulas. And the main kula that they have is that when there's a lesion on the lung, which is called a sircha, and that's the most common problem that you find in behemoths, is that there are lesions on the lung. So the Ramah allows, based on Ashkenazic tradition, that the shochet can remove the lesion with his fingernails. And if there is, immerse the lung in a bucket of water, and if the lung doesn't bubble, meaning there's no hole, so then we say it's kosher. The Sephardim don't have that kula at all. That's why the Sephardim mainly didn't eat steers or cows or bulls. They ate sheep and goats, lamb, because they're, if you get 80, 90% clear in lungs right away. But the big animals, the 1,400-pound steers that you get the steaks from, etc., will, the vast majority will have something to do with the lung that you'll have to take care of. So that was a kula from the Ashkenazim. On the other hand, the Ashkenazim had a different kula also. The Rambam paskins that Yibum comes before Chalitza. The case where the brother dies and they didn't have children, the wife of the brother. So the halacha is in the Torah that the brother has to be miyabim her, he has to marry her. If he doesn't marry her, so then we have chalitza. But according to the Rambam, the chalitza is a fallback position. The mitzvah is yibum. The Ashkenazim paskin just the other way around, the way we do it, the way the Rabbanut does it in Israel today. That chalitza comes before yibum. There's no yibum anymore. This is based, if you think about it for a minute, on another difference between the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, which is the acceptance of the cherem, the Rabbeinu Gershom. Rabbeinu Gershom said you're not allowed to have 2 wives at the same time. Polygamy. Various reasons why he said it. The Ashkenazim accepted that as a din binding upon them under almost all circumstances. There are very few adhering to it. The Sephardim never adopted the Chem, the Rabbeinu Gershom. Rabbeinu Gershom was in Mainz. He was not in Spain. You're talking at a time when there's little or no communication between different communities. Everyone is living isolated. The Sephardim didn't even hear of it. So till the 1950s yet, there was polygamy here amongst the Sephardim. It was banned by Israeli law. But even the Israeli law allowed that if they came with more than one wife, they could keep her. And that's because in the Muslim countries, they're entitled to 4 wives at a time. which is,
That's full mother-in-law.
we don't want to even discuss what that is. In any event. So there were vast differences between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim. That's the point here. And we live at a time of kibbutz golios, the mizug of the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim together. Not simple at all. So the Ashkenazim had a minhag beginning in the 12th century and expanding through the other centuries of kitniyos. Kitniyos, because of the fact there were many times when there were famines. There was not grain to make bread with. So they made it out of whatever they had. And they made it out of beans, and they made it out of peas. And therefore, they said people will see that on Pesach, we're eating bread. So even though the bread is made from beans, people will think that you could eat bread because bread is bread.
The Sephardim couldn't make it out of peas or beans or it.
Sephardim didn't have to. It's not a question couldn't. The question what you have to do. Like now, there's no wheat from the Ukraine, right? And you say the price of bread is going to go through the roof, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always, they advertise already ersatz bread. They're going to make it, in the laboratory. So because of that, they began to stay away from legumes, not to eat kitniyot. But the original takonas said, "Hova de lo losif alei." Let's not add to the burden. So whatever peas, beans, okay. So then over the centuries, they added layers and layers to this, as Jews always do. So for instance, in Europe, what the Americans call corn, the Europeans call wheat. In England, they call they call it corn. The American corn is corn, sweet corn, American corn. Now that was a product only of North America. It didn't reach Europe till the 18th century. They didn't know about it. So then the shaila arose in all the bad kitniyos or not. So here we have an interesting phenomena in the laws of kitniyos, is that we go not only according to how it's grown, but what it's called. Since it's called corn, and since corn is also called wheat, wheat is also called corn. So it's like Gzeir Shava, so American corn is kitniyos. And that's the way we pass until today. Even though American corn was unknown in Europe when the Gzeir of kitniyos originated. When you buy products here in Israel that says kosher lePesach, you have to be careful to see what else it says there, because it may say kosher lePesach le'ochay kitniyos. It's kosher lePesach for those that eat kitniyos. The Sephardim eat it. They eat rice. That's some achleikas on rice also, even by the Sephardim, because the Ritva already in the 13th century said that he found that the rice dealers, they had to bring rice from the Orient. It was expensive, so they would mix in it grain. So therefore, it could become real chametz. So there are certain sections of the Sephardic world that do not eat rice on Pesach. most of the Sephardic world does eat rice. So it's a nebulous area. You don't know how to deal with it. So they don't know Kiwana, whatever that is. Yeah, so no, you know, so Ganola. So what is it? It is kidneys. It isn't kidneys. Did we ever have it before? Is it part of the Gzeira? If it's not part of the Gzeira, why should it be kidneys? But it looks like kidneys. Tastes like kidneys. So added to this, I just want to show you how the Chumras of Pesach have evolved. There was a shaila of Shemen Hayotze min HaKidneis, oil that is produced from kidneys, corn oil, soybean oil. So what is that? Is that included in the Gzeira or not? So most of the poskim hold that Shemen Hayotze min HaKidneis is mutter. And therefore, for many years, for instance, peanut oil had a hechsher always. The Bitzko Chonim gave it the hechsher in Kovna. But it's not accepted generally. And the oil in the United States that they use for Pesach is cottonseed oil. It's made from cotton. The Eidach Redis in Israel will not use cottonseed oil for Pesach because cotton sounds like kidneys. And therefore, the only oil they use is olive oil. So kidneys is a field that's constantly growing. In the First World War, there were many attempts to be matir kidneys because of the war. They didn't have what to eat. But it never took hold. In 1948 and in the beginning of the Medina, there were those that wanted to be matir kidneys here as well. Rav Herzog has it in his Chuvas. But they were unable to do so because the Gzeira was so strong, the minig was so strong that people wouldn't give it up easily. So again, when you purchase your Pesach items, you have to be very careful to look at it, because since the majority here in Israel is non-Ashkenazic, so therefore they make products kosher Pesach that do have kidneys and are based on kidneys. The Ashkenazim therefore don't eat it on Pesach. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Zakos Yisrael V'chachir b'lahem Torah and mitzvot shenemar Adonai Chavetz Zman Tzidko Yadil Torah v'Yadir.
Yiskadal v'yiskadash mei rabo v'yamad divrach yusei yamlich machusei v'chayei kon u'v'yomei kon v'chayei d'kol beis Yisrael v'agala u'bizman koriv imru amen yehei shmei rabba v'vorach l'olam olmei olmayo yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yisba'ar v'yisromam v'yisnasei v'yishador v'yishalev v'yishalo shmei d'kucha v'yecho leilam min kol b'chasav v'shirasa tushbachasa v'nechamasa damiram b'alma v'imru amen. Yisrael v'Rabbanan v'al Talmideyam v'kol Talmidei Salmideyhom v'al kol man daskin b'roisa di b'yasra kadisha hadei v'di b'chol asar v'asar yehei lahon l'chon shloma rabba china v'chizda v'rachame v'chayei arichei v'zonei ridichei v'kanan mikadam avuhan di b'shmaya Imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Mincha Maya B'chayim Tovi Aleinu V'Kol Yisrael Imru Amen. עושה שלום ומואר, הוא יעשה ברכה ושלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויראו, אמן.